Hello. Here I am on the stage at the end of what I can only describe really as a pretty odd and quite winding journey. It's one that's been happening for probably about 2 years now, and it's taken me really kind of all over the world. I mean, I made friends with some fake news merchants in Kosovo. I lived in a political technology commune for a while. I went on an information warfare base here in the UK. Went to Vegas, met through a door hikikomori. These are people in South Korea who only live their lives online. They never leave their houses. They rarely leave their rooms. And all of that was really to try and come face to face with the kind of changing nature of kind of power in the world today. I think we can probably, I don't have to tell this room, I think, kind of feel the kind of tectonic shifting plates, right, about how society is changing and how it works is changing, how values being created is changing. We can all feel that society is changing. I think we can all probably feel that our lives are being shaped in different ways as well. But I kind of really wanted to get out there on the front lines and see it for myself and meet the people that I thought was actually doing the changing. And to try and really uncover the ways in which I think it's often kind of overlooked or misunderstood. When we get out there, you actually see that it's somewhat different to the kind of the homilies that you often hear repeated again and again and again in all the kind of conference rooms and halls that I frequent often in my job as a think tanker based in Whitehall in London. So that was the idea, that was the journey. It's the one that's probably still going, I imagine. And I wanted to kind of bring one story back to you. Probably the most relevant, I imagine, to all of you. And that's how I think that power and crime is changing. Because one of the places I went on this journey was to go inside and embed myself with a cybercrime team, actually trying to catch some cybercriminals. I really wanted to see how this kind of eternal dynamic between the kind of the coppers and the criminals, the people breaking the law and those trying to catch those breaking the law. I wanted to see how that was changing and how power was possibly changing hands or changing shape there as well. So, no one really, I haven't met many of you before. It's wonderful to do so. You're going to have to take me at my word when I say that I'm quite a mild-mannered researcher. I'm not particularly brave. So you're going to have to kind of picture the scene. I'm kind of wedged in the back of a unmarked police car with two burly police sergeants, no one uniformed, kind of winding our way through the evening traffic one evening to finally come to rest in a very, very normal residential, dormitory estate about an hour outside of London. We've all been to these places, haven't we? It's kind of red bricks, very well-pruned lawns, twitching lace curtains. Kind of everyone actually comes out and starts washing their car magically when they see that something's happening. Because something is happening. We are there. There's three cars full of police officers and me, and we've kind of silently made a circle around one of these very normal-looking houses in this very normal-looking estate. And we're there at the end of an operation called Operation Field Day. And it's been an operation that was running for a pretty long time within the unit, and we were there to finally arrest quite a serious cybercriminal. He was a serial iCloud hacker. What he was doing was breaking into people's iCloud accounts and taking all their images and all their videos primarily from them. He'd do that in the middle of the night, and he'd be out by morning. And he'd be doing that hundreds and hundreds of times. He started actually hacking into his wife's friends. He was looking for private sexual imagery. And then he'd actually turn that into something of a kind of business on a series of hidden forums across the UK. But he was caught, and we were there to get him. Now, there was only one surprising thing alone about Operation Field Day. But there were lots of things that were not surprising about it. And the first thing, of course, that wasn't surprising about Operation Field Day was that this guy existed. And again, I don't have to tell members of this room, I think, just how decisively and traumatically, crime has changed its venue over the last 10 years. There's a survey that researchers like me pay a lot of attention to called the Crime Survey of England and Wales. It's like this gold-plated Home Office survey. It asks people whether they've been a victim of crime. It doesn't rely on police data and what crime's actually been reported. It's a really, really important gauge that we've got to actually understanding what crime people actually experience across the UK. And it was about 3 years ago when, like, almost casually, they added in a question to this survey. They said, oh, have you been the victim of cybercrime, especially online fraud? And when the numbers came back, they doubled. The amount of crime that was happening in the UK, according to this survey, actually doubled. Like, until then, and Theresa May, Prime Minister and then previously as Home Secretary, had a narrative that crime was falling at the same time as investment in police was falling. And actually it wasn't true. Like, crime was changing venue to a place that we weren't counting. But then when we began to count, the numbers went right back up to where they were in 1990 levels. Suddenly we realised that, online fraud was the most common form of crime in the country. We realised you were more likely to receive a virus than be the victim of all violent crime put together. That you were more likely to have your social media accounts burgled than your house. Huge change. So absolutely no surprise. Shouldn't have been, wasn't, that this cyber criminal existed in the first place. Now, I was quite nervous before we went in. I don't know if you can tell. I actually remember being in the car and grimly thinking, what if it somehow comes down to me? What if he jumps out of a window? Do I run after him? What if he pulls out a gun or a knife? What if the experienced, burly police officers I'm with, what if they're somehow overpowered? What if it comes down to me? When the door actually opens, I've actually never seen a less hardened criminal in my entire life. He was so shocked to see the police there, he couldn't stand. They had to help him into a chair. By the way, he's exactly my age, 36 years old. He had to be helped in a chair. He had to be helped into the police car. I was expecting him to kind of be led out, like screaming, "You haven't got anything on me, coppers." There was nothing so dramatic as that, I'm afraid. Nothing even close. It was a very dry, very procedural, very officious event. It was kind of like getting your passport, but a little bit worse. And that shouldn't have been a surprise either. Because after this event, I actually went to some hacker friends of mine, and I said, can you actually teach me how to do some cybercrime? I actually want to learn how it actually works. And we've heard ransomware already mentioned. Well, they finally relented. I wasn't actually going to do, for any police officers in the room, I didn't actually do any cybercrime, right? I just wanted to learn how it worked. They finally relented. So I had this like somewhat teenage idea that I was going to be led in some kind of darkened attic, and they're probably wearing a hoodie. They were going to start typing binary code into a green screen computer. Like every stock image you've ever seen on the BBC about cybercrime, right, always has that binary code up. At least I thought maybe I'm going to do a bit of coding. Maybe we're going to craft some kind of program. Well, they opened a laptop and that came up. Now, can anyone recognize anything weird or strange about this piece of crimeware with which you can only do crime? It's a GUI. Yeah, well, not only a GUI, although brilliant. So yeah, it's got banner advertising. This is trying to upsell you to the next one in the series, which has better functionality. So when I opened this program, it said, "Hi, Carl, do you want to commit cybercrime today?" And I clicked a button that said yes. And it said, how much do you want to charge people for ransomware? And I typed in the number 2. This is, the idea that cyber criminals are somehow kind of elite hackers is absolutely ridiculous. This is point and click, drop down menu cybercrime. An idiot can do this. And this was being freely, openly advertised on a bunch of gamer forums. And just like any other piece of software that we all know and we're all familiar with on the cybersecurity side of the wall, that they too compete with each other for price and functionality. They too will try and upsell you. They too have brands. They too have development shops. They'll talk to you about how innovative they are. They'll talk to you about how easy it is to use. And this thing will produce a payload, and if I can get that payload on someone's computer, obviously then it's locked. Then the ransomware begins. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to me either that this guy was a really unhardened cybercriminal, because actually the barriers to entry into cybercrime are unbelievably low and getting lower all the time. We mentioned Ukraine and Russia, don't have time really to talk about it, but this is happening now in disinformation and influence operations online as well. So exactly the same thing, the privatization, commercialization of basically geopolitics, electoral interference, that is now happening too. And of course, that also now means that the barriers to entry into doing all of that are getting much lower too. All right, the third thing, the last thing that wasn't surprising about Operation Field Day. He was actually doing some pretty sophisticated things, he was. And that shouldn't have been surprising either, because to understand that, I had to go, it's a difficult job I sometimes had, I had to go all the way over to Las Vegas. I know, it's tough, to DEF CON. So there you are, you're sat in Caesar's Palace, you can picture it, kind of hot Nevadan dry heat, Snaccus Maximus. They actually do sell Caesar salad at Caesar's Palace. And you're lounging around, and it's a normal vegan day, this kind of weird combination of glitz and vice that Vegas is. And then suddenly, this whole new kind of player comes into town. They've got shock blue mohawks, they've got blockchain tattoos on their arms, they're generally dressed in black. They start, the billboards around Vegas start crashing. The casinos start wheeling in their ATM machines. The casinos stop allowing you to take out money. And that is because once a year, every year, tens of thousands of the world's best hackers all descend on DEF CON. It is a riotous, fun, scary, completely unique event, I think. I've never seen anything like it. Go, but don't bring your phone. Because one of the parts of DEF CON is a wall of sheep where everyone's phone has been hacked. All the images from the phone are printed out and put on the wall. That is an official part of the conference. There's been at least one divorce as a result of that. Now, in these huge halls with thousands of hackers, the world's best hackers will stand on these glowing neon podiums, and they will announce the year's cleverest, most fiendishly, technically complicated and capable exploits. And everyone will explode into cheers. So one man stood up and in quite dry monotone basically proved that he could hack into laptops using light. He then hacked into laptops using light you couldn't see. It's called stenographic encoding. You're basically wrapping various instructions for the computer into a sensor that is not normally looking out for cybersecurity threats. He then did it using sound. He then did it using sound you couldn't hear. And all the time, he was challenging a room of 1,000 world's best hackers to hack into his air-gapped laptop that was stood on the stage. It wasn't connected to the internet. Someone else stood up and said, I can cause some of the world's wind turbines in the world to burst into flames by a stop and go and catch flame attack. And then even several years ago, I would say, I know one of the themes it sounds like here as well is the way in which ML and artificial intelligence is going to change the world of cybersecurity. Well, years before, they were already talking about how it was going to change the world of hacking. This was from 2019, Deep Hack. They were teaching computers, they were teaching ML processes to find HTML exploits. This is can anyone see what this is? SQL injection. Yeah, I think you had it. SQL injection into a website. Very, very, not a sophisticated thing, but the thing that caused murmurs and rustlings around the room was that an ML process had found this by itself. It learned how to do this itself. It wasn't being taught by a computer how to do it. It wasn't being taught by a human how to do it. No. All right. So lots of unsurprising things I've explained to you all about Operation Field Day. Not surprising he existed. Not surprising that he was unhardened, barriers to entry very low. Not surprising that he was doing some sophisticated stuff. I truly believe that the hackers as a community, and they are in a weird way a community, they learn from each other, they know each other, they've got their heroes, their villains, their language. They come from all different sides of almost any political or geographic divide you could imagine, but they are a community of sorts. They definitely do have some coherent values. I truly believe that they are one of the most overlooked and most powerful communities that exist in the world today. This person was probably a member of that community, at least on the periphery of it, and so it wasn't surprising that he was doing things, and I think they are doing things which really actually far exceed now what we, the general public, and even we, perhaps more specialist professionals, believe that hackers can do. None of that was surprising to me. There was only one surprising thing, and that was that we were there. That was that we actually caught him. That was that Operation Field Day actually ended in an arrest. And so the main message I have, really, coming back from time with the cyber crime team, is that investigation after investigation after investigation, again and again and again, whether it was ransomware, whether it was DDoS attacks, whether it was romance, frauds and scams, they fell apart. Almost no one was being brought into a British courtroom. The level of frustration amongst cybercrime police officers was palpable. The level of alarm amongst them was also palpable. And the reason for that wasn't the reason, I think, that I had going in there. I'd already had going in there the idea that the police were probably being outpaced technologically. I also had the sense that the police were probably being outpaced skills-wise. If you go to cyber, like digital crime summits with the police, they will talk a lot about this. They know that that's a problem, and they're doing their best at the moment to try and close the gap. They are, like any public sector, being faced by huge problems around, well, how much can we pay someone? How much can cybercrime pay someone? They're faced with all those kinds of problems too. But actually, it wasn't any of those reasons why really these investigations fell apart. It was for one simple fact, and that was geography. Crime on the internet, like anything on the internet, was passing unbelievably easily across borders. You know, you had the perpetrator in one country, the victim in a second and a third country, evidence sprayed really all over the world. But the one thing that doesn't travel very well across borders at all is law enforcement. So even if it was happening in a cooperative jurisdiction, the United States, well, you had to write an MLAT treaty and it took 6 months, you had to write a business case for it, and often there wasn't a business case. Like the crime wasn't serious enough to justify the cost of actually doing international diplomacy to get the data back. But of course, if the data or the evidence or the perpetrator is sat in an uncooperative jurisdiction, Russia, no one is picking up the phone in Russia to British law enforcement. They weren't before the invasion of Ukraine. They're even not doing so now. So to quote one cybercrime police officer, the cost and risk of doing cybercrime if you're in Russia and you're victimizing British citizens is nil. It's absolutely nil when it comes to law enforcement. And that means that I think we're living through probably one of the most serious crises of law enforcement in the history of modern policing. I don't want to be shrill or alarmist, but that is really the message I had coming back from time with the cybercrime police officers. On the one hand, you've got crime constantly changing, constantly evolving, and becoming more and more digital all the time. On the other, you have local constabularies all over the UK desperately struggling with this prospect of not being able to reach beyond their own borders and bring evidence or perpetrators into a British courtroom. And that means that we're seeing vigilantism. We're seeing like pre-Pelian kind of mobilizations of citizens, seeking to step into this gap. And I know, obviously, industry also stepping into this gap, desperately trying to close some of the gaps that are being left open by law enforcement. Sooner or later, we will get, I really hope, a Home Secretary that will get on top of this. I don't even know who the Home Secretary is today. I haven't checked my phone since I've been on stage, so who knows what's going on there. Sooner or later, we'll have a Home Secretary that will say, all digital crime should be policed by a single national unit, and that will make a lot of sense, and that will logically begin to move us in the right direction. Until then, things are not going to go in the right direction when it comes to policing, however hard the police are trying, and however much chief constables are trying to pivot towards a problem. Right, I could talk all day about cybercrime and policing, but I won't. But I will leave us all with a single idea, and I want to make it more general again, right at the end. This is to save you, anyone who is even thinking of reading my book about all of this. No need to, because I'm giving you the TLDR on all of it. Power. I'll go back to this idea of power. So power, it can be really coercive, like the stuff I was seeing with cybercrime. Obviously financial as well, and obviously in the realm of ideas, ideational, attitudinal. Power works in all those levels, and it shapes all of us, absolutely no doubt, right? We are all creatures that are being shaped in all these different ways by the people around us. Well, civilizations really have always tried to cage power. They've always tried to control the way in which you can reach into my life, me into yours, and how we can shape each other. That's why we have laws and regulations and standards and norms, and all the things, all the squishy human things that we've always done to try and limit and basically morally put guardrails up against abuses and misuses of power. Well, whether it was in cybercrime, the story I've told you today, it could have been me spending time with journalism and understanding how that was crashing down around our ears, but there are citizen journalists and lots of new exciting mobilizations happening there. It could have been there. Could have been in business. Talk about monopoly and how that's defined and the rise of new monopolies in all but name. It could have been darknet assassination markets. I thought that one was a bit too grim for today. But it could have been there too. But in all these different areas, I think one thing is consistently happening, kind of cross-sectionally across all of them, and that is that power is breaking out of that cage. It's breaking out of the ways in which we've typically controlled it, and it's gone wild, and it's gone weird, and it's now sitting both in the hands of people that are overlooked, and it's taking forms and shapes and configurations which are overlooked as well. And that means really that we're living in a world where there's a huge onset. My editor, when I was writing my book, he gave me this horrible essay question. You know, one that you struggle with for ages, you just can't answer. Well, this was mine. Are we living in a world that's more oppressed or more liberated than ever before? What a horrible question to ask someone. So I came back with this idea that there's both tons of oppression and liberation happening, both more than ever before. And that is because power, in this wild form, is being used by human beings to do all the things that they've always tried to do, to liberate people and to be really nasty and oppress and control people as well. All I can say, I don't work in cybersecurity industry myself, but all I can say is that this industry, I cannot think of a more important thing for people to be doing right now than trying to rebuild those bars on that cage. Kind of with all the excitement around the kind of Facebook and Twitter and blockchain decentralization, actually working not only on technologies which are innovative and disruptive, but technologies which can actually restore some of the basic, most foundational ideas that we have society, like vulnerable people should be protected, like there should be restitution, like people need to feel safe, like we need to live on networks which are stable, we need to protect human values. I cannot think of a more important thing to do. So thank you to all of you that do actually go out and do it. And if anything, please know from my story of the front line that you are not going to be out of a job anytime soon. In fact, of course, it's only going to get more serious and more important, more central, all of your jobs in the years to come. So that's me. Thanks very much. Come say hello. I love to hear all your stories. And I promise you I've got a couple more that I can tell as well. So thanks very much, everyone.